If I asked you who is the president, or the correct term is general secretary of the People's Republic of China, most people in most countries would know Xi Jinping. But if I asked you that question way back 14 years ago in 2010, who was the president or the general secretary of China, most people wouldn't have a clue. They may know the name, they may know the actual face, but they may not know the actual name. And that is Xi Jinping. What he has done to China, you could say, is actually pretty awful. Near enough since 2012, I think 2013, he became the president. Xi Jinping became the president, the general secretary, the dictator, the person who controlled China. And he really wanted to put his name on the map of one of the great leaders of all time. He believes in Marxism, and his hero would be Mao Zedong, who did some horrible things by getting rid of a large percentage of the population. Some quotes are saying, it's okay if we go to war with another country, we can afford to lose 500 million people in the conflict because we still have another billion people in the population. Would you want a leader like that? So Xi Jinping, he first came to be known because he was basically one of the guys in charge of the 2008 Olympic Games. And then somehow, I don't know the history of it, how he became leader way in 2013. He was elected by the People's House of Congress, so to speak. And the people don't have an actual choice of who is going to be. They would have a choice of their local councillors in that way, and then the councillors would go to their boss, to their boss, to their boss, and there would only be about 3,000 people who would decide who the next president of China would be. Xi came to power, and he really wanted his name in history. So he started off with the train system. Yep, China does have a very good train system. The infrastructure is so superior to when it was. But the whole thing is, it's failed. Because the train system, or the Department of Transport, owes 900 billion. That's $1 billion. Is that a success? It's great for the people who can afford the high-speed train system. It's not good for the people who can't, because they would still take the slow train system because that's what they can afford. So they're both there. So it hasn't been a great success, even though you see on so many media platforms, well, this is the train system. Oh, it goes at 350 kilometers an hour. It's very cheap. Yeah, it is cheap compared to Western terms, but for someone who may earn $140 or the equivalent of that per month, it's no way could I afford that. I would have to take the slow train, which is like quarter of the price to get to A to B. What will happen with it, only time will tell. That's one failure he did. And more recently, you would say, he is going to be known in his legacy when he steps down, hopefully soon, as the leader of the Communist Party in China. He is going to be known for COVID-19. For the start of COVID-19, the lies of COVID-19, to, you could say, near enough the end. Does COVID-19 still exist? Yeah, it does, but much in a weaker term. And lots of people have been vaccinated and some people haven't, and it just was a horrible thing. But that's what he's going to be remembered for, and how little they actually did to, and how wrong it was with their system. And other countries who were poorer, like Cambodia, actually handled COVID-19 very well. I was so lucky to be in Cambodia over COVID because you didn't feel at risk at all, even though it was there, but in very, very small amounts. So he did really destroy China in that way and the reputation, but he would deny all this and would do the actual opposite. He is a guy, one of the very few presidents in the world who had never given or does live or recorded interviews. Never. He would do a statement and then that would go out to the press. So what does it tell you about the guy? Even if you don't like Joe Biden, at least he steps in front of the camera and speaks. And when he got caught, when was it? couple of years ago in Davos or some kind of economic forum gathering. He really felt uncomfortable being there because the cameras were there and they could pick up what he said, and he got caught 1 or 2 times. So 2 things how he's destroyed. The train system, yeah, it's very good, but it owes a lot of money. And so his economics are not the best in the world. And COVID, well, it came from China. Obviously, they lied about it, saying, oh, it came from Spain. Oh, no, it didn't. It came from America. Oh, no, change a bit. It came from Italy. It changed all the time, but it never came from China, according to Xi Jinping. And so that's sort of like, yeah, it did come from China. My bad, but we're going to fix it. Would be a better president, to be honest. And the other thing about housing. Now, the Chinese economic system basically is a high percentage of housing, but 2 big housing companies, one called Evergrande was one, and Country Homes is another one, where they have basically collapsed and owe billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. So how and what is going to happen? Well, she rules by fear. Upset him, disagree with him, then he is so powerful, you can just basically disappear. And people are scared of that disappear because they sort of may know what it means to disappear. A lovely concentration camp somewhere in the west of China, out of the public eye. It could be waking up with a pillow over your face. Who knows? That's me being a bit exaggerated, but he is a powerful man and he leads by fear. So most people would just say, agree with him. There have been some stories that there has been a coup and he has stepped down and there's a new leader, but it never seems to happen. There was a story during COVID that Xi Jinping caught COVID and just hid away, and he wasn't in the society, compared to Boris Johnson, who did catch COVID and he went to hospital and he survived, and he praised the national health service in the UK, that they did actually very well over the whole situation. She wouldn't do that. I think it's time for a break. So now is the year 2024. She has been in power since 2013. He actually changed the constitution because he was or is the president or the general secretary, by saying, I can extend it. So he wants his legacy, you could say, like Mao, who became president of China in 1949, and he stepped down in 1975, I think so, because he was getting quite elderly and it moved forward. And ever since Mao stepped down from 1979, near enough all the way up to 2012, China grew and grew and grew. There was one bad incident in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government learned a lot from that and gave more to the public. So they have more freedom, more capitalism. Let's get rich quick, for example. And then she took over 2012, 2013, and it sort of went back to the old days. So, I am number one, I am God, this is what happens. But because he did like that and he wasn't adapting to the 21st century, he was sort of stuck in the 20th century and sometimes in the Stone Ages, and believes in Marxism, which obviously didn't work in Russia because that's a federation. Whatever's happening with Putin and Ukraine and sanctions, etc., that's beside the point, but that's what he still believes in. While most of the people in China would just accept him and say, well, he's there as long as it doesn't interfere with my life, and I can have a holiday, I can have a car, I can have kids, I can go to school, I can earn money, I can be a rich entrepreneur, then it's a sidestep. And they would never talk about him in public. No way with that. So has actually Xi Jinping made any great things for China? Well, compared to his predecessors, ever since Mao, the presidents that we don't know the name to, they did far much more than Xi has ever done. And this was possibly really bugging him. I just wonder if he would ever see this video, because in his terms so far, there's been, China has developed, but how much money has China spent? he's got some initiatives, and he would get the positive spin with the Belt and Road initiative, that bringing prosperity to the country by train systems, ports, giving money to developing countries to develop, and they can't pay it back. So it's a spin, basically, in a way that the Sri Lankan port cost like $2 billion to make. The Sri Lankan government couldn't afford it, so they said, okay, we can use this port, we can run this port, we will use it as an operation, and we will get our money back, as you can't pay for it. So it's a long-term debt trap diplomacy contract. That's what people sign. And why do they sign it? Well, you could say it goes into corruption. When Xi basically became the president, he said, we're going to wipe out corruption. And he did put so many politicians in prison. Fantastic, excellent, well done. But do you remember 2016 and the Panama Papers, where he got caught red-handed, the same as the Prime Minister of England, the Prime Minister of Iceland, President Putin, some other countries as well, got caught red-handed putting money or their hand into the honeypot in a very indirect way, but they got cash for doing it, or they got incentives for doing it. And this was all done offshore in the Caribbean, in Panama, but there was one guy who managed to find it out, and this was the Panama. But in China, this was the whole thing. If you type in on their search engine Baidu, which is their Google, and you put in Panama Papers and you put in Xi Jinping, there will be zero search. So this is information restriction, and that's what he has made heavily on the internet, that you don't know when you're being monitored. Now, in China, you can't really get something called a public IP, which is a very secure IP for your internet. And if someone's trying to hack, you will be notified. You can't get that in China. You can if you're in a school or a university, but it would be, the base would be the public IP, but the routers around would be private, which can be hackable through that one directly within like 100-meter radius. You know what I'm trying to say with that. So the lack of information, and if you see the Global Times or Xinhua News or China Daily, the newspapers, she would always be in the front page, and it'd be something like Xi Jinping thoughts, like a yoga master. I sort of think of Kung Fu Panda and the master who taught him how to do Kung Fu, or to be a Kung Fu master in himself. That's what I sort of think. But he's human. He's not he's just a normal guy trying to be like one of these great people in the past. Maybe you would say his great people in his mind is Stalin or Leningrad or some Russian leaders. Even Mao, he would actually absolutely admire, even though you would say most people know about Mao and the atrocities that he did in China, and even how Nixon came to China way back in 1970, 71, 72, to sort of say, to try and help. But did he listen? Well, he did, but he listened too late when he was dead. That's another story entirely. So Xi Jinping, yes, I think he has destroyed China in a way that everything he touches is not successful. And he has made China so into debt. How are they going to pay it back? Through taxes, and the people may have to pay more. But if they're successful, a lot of people can accept it, a lot of people can't accept it. This is when I start to waffle, so I think it's time to leave. Please do leave your comments. Do you like Xi Jinping? Do you like Mao Zedong? Do you like Joe Biden? Do you like Donald Trump? Do you like the Prime Minister of England? What is your thought? What's your thoughts about the politics around the world? Does it affect your life? You just don't care, and you just maintain your own life regardless of what's happening in Washington or Beijing or London, for example. Wherever you are, do have a happy day, and let's leave it there for now. I will say bye-bye. Be good.